Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Tears at the Table. I'm excited today because we have the author Pamela Wagner Good. She wrote the book He Never Let Go. She's going to share a little more of her story, so I'm not going to share too much about the book because I want her to be able to share that. But welcome, Pamela, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you for bringing me on to talk to your audience and to be able to share what God has done in my life. So, I actually met Jesus twice. The first time I was around 9 years old, and what brought me there was I was a young gal, young child actually, between 3 and 4, learning with my siblings to navigate life with a beautiful mind mother from that movie with Russell Crowe, Beautiful Mind, with paranoid schizophrenia. And I also, at the same time, had a father who was working several jobs trying to pay for hospital bills and figure out what was wrong with this beautiful wife that he married and mother of 4 children because he just couldn't understand what has happened. And back then, they didn't know a whole lot, and it was really stressful on him. So, as we go through life, I experienced a lot of darkness and lived in the darkness. And me and my siblings just had to learn how to survive, just survive, and what would get us through each day. And so I did have a neighbor who came alongside me. Her daughter was close to my age and took me to my very first Sunday school class when I was 9. And I ended up going to a Bible camp. And that's where I learned and took Jesus into my heart for the first time. And then I came back. And because of all the trauma and the darkness that I didn't know how to process. I mean, here's this young gal, she'd come home and her mother would have black eyes or a broken arm, or she constantly talked about things you couldn't understand anything she was saying. She was in another world, as I call it, the second chapter in my book. And she wouldn't feed my little brother, and he was crying. And Christmas Day, my dad had her pinned up against the wall. And it was just all this darkness, and we had to find our own way how to survive that. And so as time went on, I found closer to being 12 that I was good at sports. And that's when they came and took my mother away. She got so bad. But I was good at sports and I threw everything I had into sports and boyfriends because these boyfriends, God knew, He just put these boyfriends into my life and their family became my family. And I would stay over there more than I'd ever be at my house because they were just loving, warm people. And so I did that with throwing myself into school and sports and working. So I could, and I was still surviving. And all of our family did this. We each had our own little method of surviving. And then life just went on, and I really wasn't following Jesus. And I went to get married, and I told myself I'm going to be the best mother, the best wife, I had no clue how to do either, but I was going to be the best. And I tried to be perfect at everything to prove to people I was worthy. So I was always searching for that. And I had a wonderful husband and his family again were a fabulous family for me to have. And as time went on, though, because I had all those layers of darkness, I didn't know anything about spiritual warfare. I didn't know anything about strongholds. But the ruler of darkness had those strongholds on me, and I had no clue. Like all your self-doubt and guilt and unworthiness, all those things that you're feeling, but you're trying to hide. Because I didn't want anyone to see I was broken, for sure. And I didn't want to believe I was broken because I'm going to beat this. And I have so far done that. But as time went on, I started breaking and I finally broke real hard, which is going to happen because those will always stay with you. And my marriage fell apart. I felt I was a failure as a mother. I've hurt my kids. I felt I hurt my ex husband. And I learned I can't take all of that onto myself. But a big part of it was I wasn't, whole inside. And we didn't have God in our life. And I learned that I didn't feel like a good daughter. So anyhow, I crashed and burned. And then I thought I can pick myself up. I always have. And so I tried. But this time I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it by myself. I needed help. So the second time I found Jesus was when I was on my bedroom floor, wanting to tap out of life, wanting to be done. I was over it. I was tired of hurting. And I felt that was the best answer for everyone. But like a pastor said to me, just be still, Pam. Know that Jesus is right next to you and he will help you. And a little by little, he did. So I found him at the end of my rope the second time. And little by little, Jesus kept pulling me up. And so I realized I now had to turn over everything to Jesus. But I didn't truly know how hard and how hurtful this journey that laid ahead of me to find peace in my soul. And that meant I had no idea of the heavy lifting I was going to have to do to get rid of those strongholds on me of the darkness. So I had to be truthful. I had to look at two things. I was broken. And who do I look at that for? Myself and Satan, because I had a root of rejection in myself so big. So I had to be truthful with myself and with myself for the healing to work and for me to succeed at the calling God has placed on my life, because he's going to use my story to help others. And so that's where I found him the second time. So here I am now doing the calling. It only took me many years because he set me down. I was listening to a women's testimony, and he says, "This is what you do, Pam. You share. You write a book, you share, and you keep sharing." And every time I'd go to a group, someone would ask me, "Do you have something to share?" Would cry and cry and cry. I did that for 10 years before I could actually be ready to share and know that I could trust that and that God was now in me and I in him. But it took me a long time. I started that book probably 15 years before it actually released and actually really worked on it and wrote it for like 9. So,
I love hearing that and that you're willing to be vulnerable and share like that 15-year timeline. Tears is all about sharing your story and sharing where you're comfortable at and growing in it. And I appreciate the honesty of where you're talking about how you cried as you shared it, because I think that's what people relate to the most is when you're willing to be open. And hearing the beginning of your story, you talking about trying to be the best at everything and be perfect. And then hearing you say, but now I'm willing to cry and share my story and just see where God stepped into your brokenness and really transformed it. And it reminds me of the Bible verse where Paul says that I boast in my weakness because that's where God gets the glory. So it's
yeah,
taking the brokenness of your story and showing like God showed up and he
yeah,
rescued you.
yeah. I saw something the other day that said, why I know God is real is because I knew myself before God and I know myself now after I have a relationship with God. And it's huge. And in fact, I'm just getting ready to go to an award ceremony, big gala, I think it's called gala thing. And I submitted my book for an award, and it won memoir most transformative, which when I thought about it, I go, what? And then I looked at it and I go, oh, yeah, yeah. Because I have had several people step up to me and they'd heard me speak, they know me now. And then when they read my book and learn who I was then and who I am now, they always say, I would have never, never imagined you were that little girl had I not read your book, knowing you now. So that's God's work.
That's really incredible. And it's always interesting because you see someone, you have these first impressions, and you don't know them and you don't know what they've been through and like everything you were saying you've overcome. And I think that's incredible hearing you talk about the boyfriends God placed in your life with families where you got to learn and grow, and where even when your story might not have been communicated to the outside world, God put those protections in place just
Oh,
in your life.
yeah. When I started writing and realized, oh, this is my pattern. Look how it went. And look at this. And this person was here. And God put this person here. And I'm in awe of all that. I'm like, and even my siblings, we have all come to be really tight with Christ now. And we all look back. And it was so healing because my family, two of them would never talk, well, most of them would never talk about it to anybody. And I had to interview them and constantly ask them questions. And so even my older brother, the the text he wrote about the book, he couldn't write it to me.
Mm.
He wrote it to my son because he couldn't express his emotions to me and say what he really felt. And his wife had no clue how his childhood was. And she said to me, "Thank you. Now I know." And now he'll actually talk about it a little bit. So yeah, we my brother said to someone once when they asked him about his life, and he said that movie A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, and he's up on the stand and he says, "You don't want the truth. You can't handle the truth." And actually, we couldn't handle the truth ourselves. So how are we going to share that with anyone else?
That's a good way to put it. It's usually you look in the mirror and go, oh, yeah, it was me who couldn't handle that first.
I'm like, okay, it's out in the book now. I got to say it.
Now, I do have to ask, is your
Yeah.
dad still alive as you've shared this story? I haven't had a chance to read the whole book yet, so.
No, my dad, unfortunately, was under a lot of stress and he needed a triple bypass and refused to have it. And he died very young. I was only 27. And here's the deal with the book. You think you're doing this, and it took me so long, and everybody rolled their eyes how long, but there's a reason it was in God's time. And the reason he had it take so long is at the very end, when we're ready, right before I did the conclusion, I sat down one day and said, "Oh, I don't think I've ever forgiven my stepmom to God." It wasn't a good relationship with my stepmom. And when my dad died, she court ordered us to take the ashes to her, and we never saw him again. So 40 years later, and it was 2 weeks after I said, I forgive her, Lord. 2 weeks later, my stepbrother called us, got a hold of us somehow, and his mom had died and said, "I have your dad's remains. Do you want him?"
Wow.
And it was 40 years later. We got to go put him to rest. So, you know, never give up. God has his own timing. And I think that forgiveness was a big part of it when we all could just talk. And so, yeah, 2 years ago, we were able to go lay and rest.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's incredible. And as you are talking about forgiveness and like the root of rejection, and I think of things like the root of bitterness
Yes.
and hardening hearts. For me, I have a degree in social work, so I spend a lot of time with people suffering from different mental illnesses and
Ugh.
struggling with relationship. What part do you think things like that play in mental illness? Like rejection and getting that hard heart and forgiveness.
It plays a big part. And the reason is when I did some research, I had no clue growing up. I just knew my mom was sick, never really researched it until I started doing the book. And I read another book of a family who had 6 out of 12 had mental illness. And the scientists really did a deep dive into their family and the mental illness. And I learned many things. There's so many different variables that can trigger someone. One, it could be a gene, and it could lay dormant your whole life. or something will trigger it, whether you get on drugs and your chemistry is thrown off, whether you're in a bad environment and you can't handle it and it triggers that, your hormones. And I think my mother had a hard environment growing up and her hormones got really thrown off. And she just started pulling in because she didn't feel secure and safe. Because my older brother's dad used to threaten her that he was going to steal my older brother. And all these things play in a factor. They just do. And once it's there, once it's triggered, though, you can't heal it. You can take medicine to maybe calm it. But the thing about mental illness is you have to know it's an illness. You have to love that person where that person is. You have to know that screaming at him, like my dad, he had no clue, shaking her, trying to get her to make sense, was the worst thing he could have ever done for her. She didn't feel safe. So she went deep, deep into another world. And she even did it later when my marriage fell apart because I moved her out to live with us and she was doing great. So there's three stages. There's the beginning stage of mood changes and social withdrawal, and then they hit that active phase and they go deep. But if they don't feel safe and secure or have the right medicine, and she felt very safe and secure with me and was doing great. And my brother goes, well, how do we treat her? She's never been our mom. And I said, we treat her like she's our children's grandmother. Can you imagine as a parent now never getting to mother your children? And
Yeah.
she never got to do that with us. She wasn't at anything of ours. And so now we brought her into our life and she was doing better so she could see the grandkids do that.
Yeah.
But when I went through my divorce, she started withdrawing again and she went deep again and had another breakdown. And I'd learned things about her I hadn't learned before because I called her sister. And so all those things take place. But whether you have schizophrenia or bipolar or any of those, they have to feel secure and they have to feel safe, or they'll find a way to handle that and withdraw and go within. And those voices and whatever else comes across to you happens. I had to think, why didn't any of us have that gene? We probably have that gene. It's just what we did was different than what happened with my mom. I worked out constantly, so my hormones kept up. And that was a short fix until I actually could heal myself with Jesus. But that's a short fix, right? But you have to feel loved. My family was a loving family, hard, strong family, but a loving family.
Yeah.
So you need those things for those people and understand that if something happens, you have to be very careful. It's just like an alcoholic. There's a trigger for them to go back and be an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So,
I really like how you describe that and you describe the different factors and how things can be prevented with mental illness, like safety and security. And even you were talking about working out. For myself, I have a little brother by choice. Aren't biologically related, but he passed away in 2024 and he had schizophrenia. And it was onset by PTSD from the military. It
yes,
set it off. But
yep,
what I saw in him was exactly what you said about safety and security. He, you would meet him and never knew he had it because he was on the right medication. He had created a world for himself where he was safe and secure.
yeah,
And that was something I had not seen before him. Someone who was so, like you talked about your mom in her happiest moments, so
yeah,
secure in who he was. No, like when I first met him, there would be signs where he would see things that weren't there, stuff like that. But then over time, I watched him level out and really thrive.
yeah. And a lot of people don't know that. they don't know they can thrive and then all of a sudden drop again, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, my mother was so intelligent, and she even when she was taken from us, she even went back to work. But then she would talk to us or see one of us. My sister went out to visit, and she'd crash again because she couldn't handle it. And it's painful for them, you know. And my cousin, he was he had bipolar, but he was extremely intelligent, had lots going for him, but his environment wasn't really healthy
Yeah.
growing up. And he got on drugs, and his whole chemistry went wacko. And he's been that way for 50 years. And his family loves him dearly and is there for him at all times. And he's in and out, but he's still going. And when he's out and doing good, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard for some people to see because my mom, I mean, she would, we were all at the table once, and my kids, they weren't sure what was going on. And my ex-husband, he wasn't sure either, but we had dinner, and she was struggling because we were separated. And she was sitting there going, Pamela, I need to go home. I need to go home now. I go, why? She goes, because the Russians are going to get in my house. I have to go home for the get in my house. Well, to me, I was kind of smiling on the inside and going, oh, mom. And my daughter, too, because she had seen her kind of in a bad way when she tried to run away to go to Russia. But my son, who had been at college, and my ex-husband were horrified. They didn't, they just sat there and looked like, what do we do? What do we say? It freaked them out.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard, but people need to love them where they're at.
I agree. I wanted to wrap up with that final question of, as you shared all this, I really appreciate you sharing your story. And what advice would you give to someone who has a family member that's struggling with mental illness?
Well, first and foremost, you need to take care of your health. You've got to stay healthy, eat right, do whatever movement exercise you can do, be healthy, and also stay very close to Jesus because he can walk you through this. Use his strength for this, which I didn't have and I didn't know all those years. So I would want them to do that. You got to get plenty of sleep because the Holy Spirit can guide you through these things. I knew none of this. I never prayed about it. I was just always trying to get her pills, trying to do this, and know that you can't get frustrated with them and yell at them and fight them. It doesn't seep in. They just then get even more tense and withdrawn and go deeper. And now, granted, if someone's ready to hurt someone, if they become dangerous, like my mom got angry and started throwing things and breaking things, we were taken out of the home, and my dad had to get the sheriff to come get her.
Yeah.
And that was a horrible thing to see. But when she came back, we loved her, and she knew she was loved, and she was good for the most part. But not everybody, when they look healthy, are all on the same level. And some people will relapse at different levels. And so you can't really compare your person to someone else, but just stay with them and pray for them and have patience and kindness.
I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that advice, being vulnerable with your story. And I hope it reaches a lot more people. This is a topic that's not talked about enough.
No, it's
So
not.
I really appreciate you pioneering that.
Thank you so much. It's deep on my heart. And thank you for letting me share that with your listeners.
Thank you.